Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And today we're going to talk about how to manage sudden high income when you start experiencing it. And also, what are some common mistakes and pitfalls to avoid when you begin making a higher income? It's about knowing your values and not falling into the trap of just keeping up, with the next person. Because one thing we heard on a meeting recently was the 70-plus-year-old doctors who are still living paycheck to paycheck because they've never put in place a plan or had that discipline.
Because everything you spend individually has to pass through the tax man's hands first. So if you're a high income earner and you're in the 35-37% federal tax rate, every time you decide to go spend those dollars, you're giving 35 to 37% to the tax man to go do that. And that's okay to do that. You just need to know that that's part of the cost as well.
So Bob, I'm excited to talk about this topic today because it's one that has affected me personally. And we've been speaking mostly to doctors on our podcast, but I think it's something that's very relevant to any business owner who goes from not making a lot of money to suddenly making a lot of money. And we see this happening more and more with technology companies and online businesses where you create something and it takes off. I mean, it's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
But oftentimes our mindset is not where it needs to be, and we make a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to talk about that. And when it comes to doctors, I think it's a little different because they know going in that they're going to be investing in their education. They're probably going to be accruing some debt, but eventually when they start making that high income, they're going to keep that high income. But there are still mistakes that they make that they can avoid and go in with their eyes wide open. But I think when it comes to non-doctors, business owners, oftentimes we'll start making this good money and having this success, but how many businesses end up failing even after a pretty successful run?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the experience for me. I had a really good run in direct sales for about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from making a pretty normal corporate salary to making multiple six figures in a year. And it was so exciting and so fun. But when that first tax bill came, when my accountant sat down and told me what I owed, it was an absolute shock. And that was my first introduction to paying quarterly taxes. So now I was in a situation where I was paying last year's taxes on a payment plan, and now I was paying quarterly for this year's taxes. And it's like, I'm making all this money, but where is it all going?
Yeah.
So I'd like to start with, what are some tips you would give someone who is suddenly making way more money than they expect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we all go through these experiences and these lessons. No one's immune to this. I don't care what your background is or experience, or it's, well, the majority of us have started with nothing and became something, even if we're kids and our parents are wealthy. Unless our parents made a very conscious decision and effort of teaching you about finances and money and work ethic and all that, it's very rare that that situation occurs all at once. It happens, but the majority of people have these experiences and they're like, oh crap, it's the school of hard knocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the same for physicians. I mean, they go through this period of education and they get into medical school, and then they get into residency, and then they may go and start their own practice or join a practice. And if they're joining a practice that's not connected to like a medical hospital or something to that effect, they may have a 2-3 year period where they have the opportunity to become a partner and earn profits from the practice and or others entities like a surgery center or whatever their case may be. It is that mentality of I've made it. I've worked for so long, just scratching and inching by, that finally now I have this amount of money, and it's almost like you've hit your own lottery, right? It doesn't have, it's not a bunch of commas or, multi-millions or billions or anything like that. But you can look at some e-commerce type sites and businesses that they could go from, man, we're just squeaking by at 10 grand. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're making, 400,000 or 500,000 a month.
Mhm.
And, there's many things to address. And to your point, taxes, right? To your point, the managing the cash flow. I personally believe that first year, and it's really hard to do, especially when you're a physician, you've given up so much time and you may have accumulated debt over this period of time, that once you get that big payday, so to speak, and that's going to be consistent, as long as you continue to be, healthy and consistent. And I really like people waiting 6, 9, preferably a year afterwards to that second year start making decisions on, I'm going to upgrade my vehicle. I'm
Mhm.
going to upgrade my house. I'm going to upgrade things. And the reason being is it allows you to settle in and get that first year, so to speak, get that first tax bill, kind of go through this process of understanding where we're at. It's that delayed gratification that actually direct sales, when you're in the right direct sales um, company and training program, a lot of them are linked to self-improvement, self-help, personal development type education. And so that delayed gratification is taught in most of those organizations. And that's the reason why, is because you could have a great year, you could have a great few months, and then all of a sudden you spend some time spending the money that you earned and you're not building your business. Right. That's in the direct sales. That could be e-commerce. That could be just a regular mechanic shop. Right.
Mhm.
And there's a book by Jed Blunt called Fanatical Prospecting. And one of the things he talks about in that is that the constant need, the entire book is the constant need of keeping prospects in your funnel. Now, as a physician, you're not going out and getting prospects unless you're like in dermatology or something like that, where you have social media and that's how you gather your patients and that sort of stuff and just get that activity. But the majority of physicians, they don't have that need to go prospect. Maybe getting some referrals from other physicians around, but typically when you're starting your practice or you've joined a practice, that flow is already there. So it's that income now that's coming in that you really got to delay some of that gratification. It's hard, especially if you're married and you've during this period of time of residency, you've started having a family, right? And you have these responsibilities, and it's, man, please understand what I'm saying is not just like, oh, just snap your finger and it happens. It is so hard. It's a daily discipline decision because especially now with these and having your social media and having things just literally bombard us every second.
Mhm.
Physicians being in the hospitals, making rounds, or in medical buildings, you're around other people who've been a physician for a longer period of time. You're all parking in the physician parking lot and you're seeing Maserati, Mercedes, BMW, Maserati, Land Rover, right? You're seeing all these, your Toyota.
Yeah.
which Toyota is a great car, right? The Camry is the number one car in the nation of sales, right? Or something like that. But the point of that is that I saw this great meme about Jeff Bezos, and it was a picture of him in the days that he was just starting Amazon. It's a beaten down kind of picture, and the desk, you could tell it looks like he just picked it off the side of the road and drug it into this office space. And what the caption said underneath it is, don't judge somebody's final chapter without knowing their first chapter.
Mm.
Right. And so we can't judge ourselves. And that's where the whole aspect of, the Bible, keeping up with the Joneses, or don't create these expectations. And it really, I just think the focus, and I feel like I'm kind of blabbing a little bit here, Erin, but this is such it's a tough thing for somebody in my position to sit here and say, when it's a constant daily discipline of myself as well.
Mhm.
Because you do, like in our business, we do want to put more money into advertising. We want to put more money into staffing. We want to to prepare for more members and being able to support those members, at least from our business perspective, right? And so, but there's a fine line of
Mhm.
that, and preparing for that, so to speak, rainy day. Does that make sense?
It does. And so I think on a personal finance level, you're talking about walking through the parking lot and seeing all these fancy cars. So one thing we do with our members is walk them through what their values are. And oftentimes people haven't even stopped to examine this. They do fall into that trap of, well, I deserve this and I want that and I want that. But we're all different. Like for me, a fancy car doesn't do much for me, but like being able to go on a nice vacation, oh my gosh. So one thing I wish I had done when I was really making a lot of money, and I will do it a lot better next time, is having that balance and setting that limit to like, I'm not going to let my lifestyle expand to the point of what I'm making or even beyond. I'm going to set a limit, and it's still a good. And then within those confines, what is really important to me, and what do I want to spend my money on? And it's like the idea of the millionaire next door. Like if a big fancy house or a fancy car isn't what gets you excited, that's okay. It might be your kid's education, or like that big anniversary trip you just took. It's about knowing your values and not falling into the trap of just keeping up, with the next person. Because one thing we heard on a meeting recently was the 70-plus-year-old doctors who are still living paycheck to paycheck because they've never put in place a plan or had that discipline. So I would say like one of the top tips is just take a step back and have a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the key, is that when physicians become our members, even before that, in our discovery phase, right? We go through that values based. We try to figure out what their total strategic value is. The TSV is what we call it. And that value is not just the tax savings that the possibility that you're overpaying in taxes and what that tax savings looks like, but it's also the value that you as an individual bring to your practice and what that equates into value in your practice. So your personal life. And it's very important to understand that, because I'm like you, Erin. Car, I could care less. I buy all of our cars we buy are used cars, every single one of them. I could care less. It does not impress me. I'll park in, I'm originally from Orange County, and everybody and their mother drives a BMW and a Mercedes. Well, I see kids coming out of high school. So what? That means you have $300 a month to lease a vehicle. Right. And Dana Carvey years ago had part of his bit about these fancy celebrity shows, right? Like the Grammys or whatever. And he was telling that the one time he ran by one of the limos, and they rolled down the window, and he's like, "Ooh, you got $100 an hour." Right. So it's like, so limo is impressive. It's neat, right? But it doesn't mean that they own the limo and they have a full-time driver, right? They rented it and stuff. And, these people on Facebook that are sitting next to that awesome lime green or orange Lamborghini, you can go rent that. So those things don't impress me. But for me, even traveling, I enjoy traveling, but as a business owner, it actually adds more stress to me to travel than not to travel, right? I could take a half a day off, and that would be like a week's long vacation for me. That energizes me. That's exciting to me because I love what I do so much. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who loves traveling and likes to go away for a week doesn't love what they do, but that's me personally. I understand who I am. But if my wife can go and buy a new blouse or a new pair of shoes, and that brings a smile to her face and joy, that's what I like. My kids can go do something, right? I can see them enjoying my hard work, because that's what I'm working hard for myself, for our members, but also for the people I love and I enjoy, right? I give away a ton of money to church and charities and stuff because I like to see what good they can do with it. Because if it's sitting in my account or I'm spending it, what good is that? Right. For me, it's a short-term emotion. I like to have a little, but that's me. And that's the point of the values-based planning part of the discovery is, what do you want? Right. You need to have your own plan. And I think that plan is what's key. And understanding the plan, because that TSV number, that total strategic value number that we bring into play, that has to be to where you can sleep well at night. You're not worried about money. You're not worried about your wife wondering this. So we're not saying, in this process, we tell people to eat rice and hot dogs. It's enjoy your life. Let's just look at your situation and see where may actually be extra dollars that are floating away that they don't need to. Because everything you spend individually has to pass through the tax man's hands first. So if you're a high income earner and you're in the 35, 37% federal tax rate, every time you decide to go spend those dollars, you're giving 35 to 37% to the tax man to go do that. And that's okay to do that. You just need to know that that's part of the cost as well, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just defining what that looks like. So when there are funds, did you know that you can do certain things tax deductible? If you equate them to, physicians have to do continuing ed all the time. Maybe you go to a nice resort with your wife, have a weekend away, but you're going and getting continuing education credits because of you have to do it as a physician. There's a potential of that being a tax deductible expense.
Yeah.
Right? It's a business trip or whatever the case may be. This is not advice. I'm not telling you to go do that. Obviously, we have to know your personal situation to give you advice, but that's just an overall education information example of, hey, let's be mindful of what we're doing, right? Still do it, but let's be mindful of what it is. What's the biggest benefit? Let's make our dollars work hard for us because we work hard for them, right?
I love it. I think we could do a few episodes on this topic of earning high income and how to go in with your eyes wide open. And I think the biggest takeaway is to just have a plan. And oftentimes we're so busy, we're so swept up in the next chapter and like what has to happen today. And like, we don't sit down and make a plan and we don't know where to start. So, that's where a professional like us, we can help guide you through that. And then there's just so much peace that comes with having a plan for what's coming, and what's important to you.
So let's do this, Erin. Let's end this episode here and let's just do a part 2. And, and if you're listening and we're jumping to part 2, just, next Thursday, expect us the second part. Because I think we got some momentum here. And I think this is important for our listeners to be aware of and pay attention to.
I love it. Okay. So for now, thanks for joining us. You can find us on LinkedIn. And how does Joe always like to sign off? Go be a wealth maverick.